So I've been director of the program for, I guess, 3 years. See, I don't even know that. I've been moving into my 4th year. But I came at the beginning of the program, which was in 1990. So we're a fairly new doctoral program compared to many other programs that have been around for a long time. Although I say fairly new, and now I'm realizing it's 22 years when we entered the place. And our program is a fairly unusual doctoral program. So if you're in the business of looking at and selecting doctoral programs, I'm going to give you some aspects of our program that will tell you how it's different than other doctoral programs. Because if you're looking at other ones, you're also going to be kind of examining them closely. We are a 114-credit full-time doctoral program. And so in order to receive the degree of doctoral psychology from our program, you have to complete those 114 credits. Most students do that in 4 years in residence. And then you need to do a 1-year full-time internship, which is called a pre-doctoral internship, which is a requirement as part of the APA, American Psychological Association, that accredits our program. So we have not only LIU Coast, that is our administrator, but we also have the APA, American Psychological Association, that really influences our curriculum and our credits and all of those kinds of things. So there are many things within the APA guidelines that are not negotiable in order to give a doctoral program. Maybe just leave the little piece of wood in there so it doesn't lock or something. Like, you know what I mean? Thank you. So it's unusual in the following ways. The 114 credits is pretty standard. The APA decides what coursework is needed for the doctoral degree in psychology. But within that, there's some flexibility, and we do things, a number of things in a different way. We emphasize 2 theoretical orientations to psychotherapy treatment, psychodynamic and cognitive behavioral. And what we do is we do both of those orientations, and they're quite different in terms of how you approach assessment, diagnosis, and actually treatment planning for patients. And we do both of those orientations, believing that students will be better, I guess, more marketable or better placed in the workforce if they are fluent in both of those what we call languages. So other programs offer probably an emphasis in one or the other, or some programs call themselves eclectic and they do a little bit of many things. We don't do a little bit of many things. We do 2 things and we do them fairly well. So that's a hallmark difference of our program, is that we have this dual orientation. And we suggest that students be open and receptive to both approaches in working psychotherapeutically with patients before they decide what it is that they want to do. You're better off making an educated decision as opposed to a popularity decision. So that's one way that our program is different. We also have majors, or what we call elective concentrations, or there are specialty avenues in our program. And so somewhere at the end of the 2nd year, these students who are in the doctoral program, and as I said, it's a 4-year, I don't know if you probably can hear me back there, they make a decision about what they're going to major in. And so you need to pick one of 3 majors or specialty concentrations. And those 3 concentrations are designed to train psychologists, clinical psychologists, to work with what we call typically underserved populations. Populations of patients who don't typically receive services from psychologists, they receive services from other mental health professionals. So our mission is to serving underserved populations. And in that vein, we have developed these 3 concentration areas. One is in serious mental illness. And those are patients who suffer from chronic debilitating mental illness conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and a lot of the access to characterological disorders as well. And so, and the second is family violence, and those are our clients that suffer from all kinds of after effects of domestic violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and who also are perpetrators of that abuse, because there's a need to work with those parents who are abusive or those spouses that abuse their spouse. And the third area of concentration is called applied child, and that is to really serve what we, again, consider to be underserved populations of children. So So that covers the area of children in school settings, in community settings, and in the home setting. And so that has a multi-focus. And each of these orientations is headed by an orientation leader who's a full-time faculty member. And on our website, on our Facebook page, which we can give you access to, each of them does a short video describing the concentration or the specialty area. So you can go to that Facebook page and click on each of those and hear them speak about what it means to take the concentration in family violence or the concentration in serious and persistent mental illness, and they'll talk to you about it. What it means from an administrative angle is you pick a major and you take 2 courses, 2 seminars in that major that other students don't take. Other than that, you are kind of lockstep with your cohort, meaning you take all of the same courses. There are some electives that come up now and then. Students do opt to take an elective, and we have a series of electives. For example, in the fall, the elective being offered is DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which is a very popular mode of treatment right now, and it's a relatively complicated process of treatment. We happen to have a faculty member who's an expert in DBT, so she offers that concentration. Another faculty member, that elective. Another faculty member offers an elective periodically in dreams and the unconscious. Not a part of the APA design curriculum, not a part of our requirements for you to graduate, but for students who are interested in pursuing more of an analytic approach to working with patients and working with the unconscious and with dreams as part of that. So you take your 2 courses in your major or your concentration, and then you devote a time in one of your 2 external externships, and I'll get to the clinical training in a moment, to working in that area. So if you're selecting serious and persistent mental illness, then either your 3rd or your 4th year externship needs to be with that population, so that you not only get the classroom or academic training in that, but you also then are working in an externship and being supervised in clinical work with that population. And then the 3rd piece of it is that some students do their dissertation research in their concentration area as well, but it's not a requirement. So that's another way that our program differs. Orientations, the 2 orientations, the concentration areas. We have a clinical training model that is somewhat different from other programs. We're not the only ones that do it this way, but I'll describe that for you. Our first-year students do not do a clinical placement. We don't send them out anywhere. We feel like there's way too much anxiety and noviceness to send anybody anywhere to have the responsibility of working with patients. So we have everybody do their academic work, and you take a very heavy course load in your first year. In fact, there are 5 assessment courses that you take because you are trained in doing all kinds of cognitive personality assessments for both children and for adults. And so that's a requirement of our program. When you reach your 2nd year, you are placed in our on-campus training clinic, and there's a brochure on the side about that. That's called the Psychological Services Center. And we're here on campus. Actually, our location on campus is marvelous. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the CW Post campus, but we have 2 buildings that are dedicated purely to our doctoral program. They're called the lodges. I don't really think they were motor lodges or anything back in the day, but they were these 2 small dorm spaces that were designed, and we've taken them over and they've redeveloped them for us. Lodge A is actually the clinic, and that is where the Psychological Services Center is located. Lodge B is where the classrooms and the faculty have their offices. So we essentially are a part of campus kind of unto ourselves with these 2 buildings dedicated purely to the psychology department. So going back to the clinical training model, the 2nd year students are placed in the Psychological Services Center. So the staff of that center are all 2nd year students. And it is a full-service community mental health center, serving primarily the local areas for services of assessment and treatment for children, adults, and for families. So students are placed there, and there's a caseload that comes in. We get referrals, we get phone calls, that sort of thing from the local community. Charge a very low fee. I think the average fee paid is about $11 a session. So We're available to serve people that don't have the access to other kinds of psychological services. They don't have insurance, or they don't have money, or they want to come here for whatever reason. We are not the college counseling center. There is a separate building for that, a college counseling center, although they do refer us some patients, and there is some overlap. And I call it TBD, to be determined how that's going to work in the future, because I think we provide really good services. Each student that's placed in the clinic in their second year gets, the requirements are that you carry between 4 and 6 patients per year, that you do 4 or 5 complete full psychological assessment batteries, and that you run 2 groups. So the clinical requirements are high. You will be doing a lot of things there, and you're also taking a full academic course load, because that doesn't end. Still take the courses, and we do try to marry the courses with the clinical work. So in your second year, your courses are much more around case conceptualization, treatment planning, evaluating treatment outcome, that sort of thing, because you're working actually with patients in the clinic. And so you do a number of hours there per week. You also receive many hours of supervision, and this is really what our training model is about. We believe that we should train you and supervise you before anybody else supervises you. So that's why we have everybody do the second year in the clinic, and then we send you out to the host of agencies, hospitals, settings in the metropolitan area, and there are many, where you then do 2 days a week or 3 days a week sort of as an externship in another setting. But their staff supervises you. And we don't have control over what their staff does. We don't have control over the caseload. We can't really control it. We have great relationships with all those agencies, and we sort of have weaned out over the years placements that weren't so productive for students. So we are in all of the local state facilities, all of the local community facilities, all of the private hospitals, and we have students that live in Jersey and prefer to do their placement in Jersey, so they're 2 days a week in Jersey in their 3rd or 4th year, or they're in Westchester. I think we've had students from Staten Island. We do have students that try to live many miles away and commute to the program, and it's tough because it's a full-time program, but we do try to work with them on placing them in their home state. I don't think we would go as far as Pennsylvania or Ohio, but New York, upstate New York and Jersey, we have certainly accommodated. Actually, we have a student from Connecticut who's just finishing up too, so she drove down from Fairfield, Connecticut, and was to commute to our program. So that's a little bit different, because other programs will send you out right away. You'll get a placement right away, and then we feel like then your clinical training is done by other people, not your faculty, not your primary faculty. So we believe strongly in the model. Before becoming director of the program, I ran the Psych Services Center since the inception of the program, since 1990. So I wore that hat for 18 years and developed that clinical training model, and I really, really believe in it. We see many clients, all different types of clients, and it's seen to be a general clinical training experience. What that means is that even if you never really think of yourself as ever working with children, you'll get a child case, because that's what we want you to do. Again, making an informed decision about why you don't want to work with children, having worked with children, not just saying, I never want to work with children and never doing it. That's not an informed decision. The supervision at the clinic is very intense, and so everyone is assigned to a faculty member for their primary clinical supervision. Again, that's slightly different than what's in other doctoral programs, so the faculty themselves don't do the supervision in the clinic, but they have other people that do that. Now, if your faculty supervisor is of the CBT persuasion, you will then be assigned to a second clinical supervisor who is an adjunct from the community in the other orientation. So if your primary faculty supervisor is psychodynamic, then your community supervisor would be CBT. So you're getting training, and you're seeing patients in both orientations. Even if you have a penchant for one or the other, you still need to work in both orientations, because that's part of our training model, is that you will be trained in both. You also receive an hour a week of group supervision, because you need to run groups, 2 groups. Many people run sort of short-term psychoeducational skills training groups, such as social skills for children, bullying prevention programs. There's a group for, what's it called? I'm blocking on the memory because it's about middle-aged women, so it's sort of a thing. What is that group called?
Women in Transition.
Women in Transition, there we go. So there's a group for women in transition, women who are sort of either divorced or widowed or midlife kind of transition. It's a support group for them. Now you might think, what are young students, can they offer as the group leaders for that? But there's a curriculum, and you are the group facilitators of their dialogue and their support for one another. There are parenting groups that occur, all kinds of different groups that students take responsibility for running and then actually implement them while they're at the clinic, giving you that experience as well. Even if you never want to run a group again, you will have the experience of doing it. During that second year placement, then, and you also receive testing supervision. So when you have a testing case, you have a testing supervisor. So potentially that's 4 hours a week of supervision. And you might have a testing case, a CBT case, a psychodynamic case in a group, which is not a lot of patients, but you have 4 hours of supervision. Why do you think we're so crazy about supervision? Because I think that's the hallmark, the foundation of good clinical training, is the amount of supervision you get. Not the number of clients you see. You can see very few clients, but it's the supervision that makes the difference in your competency level in becoming a clinician. So when you go to other programs and you find out about their clinical training models, ask them about supervision, because that's very important for you all who are entering the profession. In the middle of the second year, you then begin to think about your concentration area, and you begin to think about where you want to do a placement in your third year, because then you go outside. You go to an external externship. And so it's a process of applying and interviewing, and it's somewhat competitive because there are limited externship opportunities. All of our students get placed. It's a non-paying job. It is a freebie. It's part of your clinical training, and you will spend your third year and your fourth year in an outside agency doing your clinical training. The culmination of the clinical training component of our program is what we call the CCE. It's a clinical competency evaluation. It is the hurdle that every student has to get over to prove their clinical competency. In the old days, when I was in graduate school in a clinical program, we had what was known as comps, comprehensive examinations, where you actually have to go for several days and take exams on everything you ever learned in your doctoral program. We've replaced that with an actual clinical competency evaluation where you do a case presentation that you work on for some time in your third year, and you present your clinical work, your case, your DVD of your session, your written sample to a panel of 3 psychologists, only one of whom you will know. So it's a little bit daunting, but by that time you should be ready to talk about your case with a certain level of assurance that you know what you're doing. You're still novice, but you know what you're doing at that point. That's called the CCE, and that occurs in the summer of the third year. So you have now completed 2 years of clinical training. You've had 2 years of supervision. You've had 3 years of academics. You should be able to talk about a case that you've worked with in a sophisticated manner. We do have a research requirement. PsyD programs vary with what they require students to do in terms of research. We are not a PhD program, so you do not have to do a doctoral dissertation in a PhD fashion. By that I mean we have a lot greater flexibility with what we accept as a doctoral project or a doctoral dissertation. So students do a range of research projects. I would say that maybe a third to 2/5 or maybe even half of our students do a what we call qualitative dissertation, which means they investigate a phenomenon. It's not quantitative, but they conduct interviews with folks about certain phenomena. So I just finished a dissertation with a student who was very interested in girls' experiences in friendships in high school. What she was really interested in looking at was relational aggression and this idea of the subtle bullying that girls do in middle school in particular around friendships and how that really impacts the girls' sense of themselves, their sense of popularity, that sort of thing. And so she conducted interviews with 18, 19-year-old girls about their experiences in high school. It was pretty interesting what she found out about how the bullying, men may not know about this, but for girls, the most bullying girls in middle school years are the popular girls. And so it's all about the queen bees, the wannabes, and all that process. And no matter who she talked to, it was the same experience. And so that's an example of qualitative study. She didn't give out questionnaires, she didn't do quantitative analysis of her data, but she took a specific phenomenon. We have another student who's interested in cultural issues and the development of psychologists. And in particular, she's interviewing psychologists, black women psychologists who have made it in the sense that they are successful. And what did they see as their experiences in college, in graduate school, in training that helped them become successful? What was it that helped them do it? In order to maybe perhaps attract more black women to the profession or that sort of thing. So that's a kind of a qualitative research where the students take an issue that they're interested in and they go out and they interview people about that. We have other students that do kind of a pre-post analysis. I have a student that just ran an anger management, 2 anger management groups in a charter school in Roosevelt. And I can't think of any spending my time with 5th graders, but she did. 5th and 6th grade boys and girls, and they did anger management groups, and she did a pre-post analysis. Now that's not experimental research or controlled in the methodological ways we think of as something that's going to be published, a PhD dissertation, but it's a quantitative look at a clinical issue. We have this program, we want to see if it works. It's like a program evaluation. So the types of research that students do is quite varied, and it's much more based on their interests, not on who the lab you are assigned to, and not on sort of what faculty member wants to sponsor you. It's much more about you finding your interest areas and pursuing that, and that's a very strong element of our program as we support the students and their interests, because you're going to be with yourself for a very long time, so you want to do what makes sense for you, that's in sync with your own objectives, your own professional desires and aspirations. A couple of other things that we have going on. It's a kind of a dynamic place. There's a lot of things that go on in our program. I always say the clinical training is a third, the academic coursework is a third, and then there's all the rest that's the other third. And we have a lot of things that go on that kind of is more about kind of a holistic way that we train you in many other things. So we have a lot of student groups that are very strong and operative. We have a lot of study groups. We have a lot of other specialization groups, and I'll give you a couple of examples of those. In the student groups, we have something called Safe Zone. It is a curriculum that all first-year students go through, and it is to increase student sensitivity to LGBT issues and working with LGBT clients. So we are considered to be a safe place for clients as well as for students. And so that's a student-run program. Faculty are not involved in that. The students run it. They implement the curriculum. They have the discussion groups so that the students can talk about those issues. We have a program called SMART, a student group called SMART, Students for Multicultural Assessment, Research, and Training. Those are the students that speak about diversity issues. And the students run that group. They bring in speakers. They create experiences for everyone in the program to become more sensitive to issues of diversity. Not simply cultural diversity, but we talk about other aspects of diversity having to do with, for example, financial diversity, working with the homeless, working with impoverished folks, working with other aspects of diversity such as handicapping conditions. We had a presentation on deafness and what happens with deaf clients and how deaf clients feel about accessing psychological services, and can you work with a deaf client, and what do you need to do? So it's a really kind of interesting group. So it's an extra. We have a gender studies group, a group of folks that get together and put together conversations, presentations, and experiences about gender issues. because gender is always an interesting conversation to have. We have, the profession of psychology is much more of a female profession these days than it was a male profession. Many of the faculty are in doctoral programs in clinical psychology are male because they were trained in the 30s. No, I'm kidding. But they were trained a while ago when it was dominated by men in the profession, particularly in the 50s, the 60s, and 70s. Everyone in the clinical psychology doctoral programs were men. Is that a function of women not having access? We can go, we can talk about that forever. But now, it's probably pretty much a fifth of the students are men, and the rest are women. So it's now a heavily dominated female profession. And how does it feel to be a male in that profession? Actually, we have a student doing a dissertation on that, don't we? Isn't he examining what it's like to be a male in this profession? I think that's an example. He decided it's his experience. He wanted to interview other male psychology graduate students and say, what is it like to be in this profession? And, what's your experience as a man? What's your experience of being a man in this program? And how do women relate to you? And all that sort of stuff. So the gender study group is kind of fun. A couple of years ago, I did a presentation in it, and then I gave everyone a case study to read. And in the case study, and it was a case study of an adult who came in for treatment, all references to gender were eliminated, but the client's story was told. And so then it was about, is this a male or a female client? Pretty much even split down the room. This whole side said, no, this has got to be a woman. And then, no, this has got to be a male client. And the question of why became a very interesting discussion. Why do you think this is a man? Why do you think this is a woman? And sort of that dialogue. So the gender studies group is really kind of fun, but it's extra. The two most labor-intensive extra programs we have are really very new and very exciting. One is the family therapy program, which I run. And students have opted to do this. We're now in our finishing our second year. We're going into our third year. Students have taken elective in family therapy and decide that they want to work with families, which is a lot more complicated than working individually, where you actually have to work within the family dynamics. So those students opt to take an extra hour a week of supervision in the clinic in family therapy, and then they have family cases, and we meet and we talk about the dynamics of that. And there's multiple ways that they get involved with doing some research on the family therapy process in that. I think we have a brochure here about this trauma team. Do we have it? No, we don't. Oh, it was left in my car. I know you gave it to me. We have something called the trauma team. Now this is very cutting edge, and it's kind of exciting. When I became director of the program, we had somebody come in to be the director of the Psychological Services Center. The man that took that position was formerly the director of the Family Resource Center, 9/11 Family Resource Center in Oceanside, who's affiliated with South Nassau Community's Hospital. After 9/11, there were a number of places around the metropolitan area that set up centers to provide services for anybody affected by 9/11. So he ran that center. And then, funding got changed, and that sort of center died down. But he is a nationally known, internationally known expert in trauma responding. So he's been at Hurricane Katrina, the Sichuan earthquake, wherever there's a trauma, a Red Cross responder, they call him and they say, his name is Dr. DeMaria, can you come and do a response? So he has a very different approach to working psychologically. Trauma responses are you go to the site of the trauma and you provide some support and consultation. It's not really doing therapy, it's doing trauma responding. And so when Hurricane Katrina happened, he went there, and he was there, he calls it deployed. I think it's a sort of a military model. And he was there, boots on the ground, they say, where he was actually providing services. And what was he really doing? He was just talking to people. He was providing some comfort, some assistance, some problem solving, just sort of a person to be there with them as they negotiated their way through the trauma. Now what he's done is he's brought that to our program, and he says we can do this locally. So now we're in our third year of trauma responses, and we have a very active trauma team. Most of the trauma team responders are first and second year students. And what happens is there's a trauma somewhere usually on Long Island, but also in the 5 boroughs. And Dr. DeMera gets a phone call. I'll give you an example of one that I worked on. The school called up and said the baseball coach committed suicide. What do we do? So he mobilizes several folks who know something about this because they've been on trauma responses the year before. They have a meeting, they decide what they're going to do, and they provide a response. They go, mostly the students go into the school, and he might do an overview presentation to either students, to faculty, or to administrators. And then the students then have small breakout groups where they provide discussion groups for the kids. And in this case, he did a program for the faculty about, what do you do? What do you say? How do you respond to this coach who committed suicide? What do we say to the kids? And then our students did groups with the kids. And a couple of our students had the rest of the baseball team. And they had them in a small room, allowing them to talk about their fears, their concerns, their freakouts, their shock, and ask all those questions that those 16 and 17-year-old boys wanted to ask. And it's greatly facilitated because the two people running the group are not teachers, they're not guidance counselors, they're not anybody in the school that's going to talk to anybody else in the school. So in a way it's anonymous. So the boys felt free to really talk about it. And they wanted to know how to approach this guy's son because his son was on the baseball team too. And so he had just lost his father. So these kids are all about what should we do. There are people who are responding on his Facebook. So it was a kind of a discussion about what do you do? Nobody has answers necessarily about a specific thing, but it's about providing an immediate response. When the students are done with that, then we all assemble. I usually run a process group for the students that have been at the site of the response, and they talk about their experiences. We had another one actually in a beauty school where there was a girl, and these were sort of over 18-year-old girls kind of who were learning how to cut and do hair, and they were in a beauty school, and there was a girl in there that was quite weird. A lot of them admitted to bullying her and ostracizing her. She hung herself. Wow. What do you think they felt, those other girls? Tremendous sense of responsibility. Did we cause it? That sort of thing. But they needed a way to talk about it. So we went in as a group of, I think there were 5 or 6 of us that went into the beauty school. And we just ran these groups so people could have a conversation about what they were feeling at the moment. Because the idea is that if you process your trauma relatively soon, as opposed to stuffing it or shutting it off, you have a greater chance of working it through. Another one I was on was a horrible one in which a father actually killed his 2 daughters and his wife and then turned the gun on himself. And so, whoa, and this happened to have been in the community that I live in Garden City. So many levels of people were affected. The woman was involved in the church, and so the whole parish and all the women's groups were involved. The middle school teachers, the high school teachers where the 2 daughters were in, were just horrified. And then, of course, who was the perpetrator? The father. How do you even explain that to kids, that a father could do? It's just horrible. So that was so it's it's very compelling, it's very scary work to do, but the students who go on these, you're never alone, you're always paired up with somebody who's in an upper grade or 2nd or 3rd year student to go on a response. There's training that goes on if you're part of a trauma team. Dr. DeMera trains all the students what he calls psychological first aid. There is a model to use. Faculty are involved. We go to the sites. We do the supervision. So it's really it's a very interesting process. A lot of the students are doing now their research on this process, on this type of psychological first aid. It's a kind of a vibrant program. The trauma team received an award in January for being the most innovative program in a doctoral program in the country. So it's got a lot of press, and it's quite interesting. You won't find a trauma team in any other doctoral program. So it's a little scary, and it's a voluntary thing. So the students don't have to do it. It's only students that are interested in working in trauma, which unfortunately I don't think is a problem that's ever going to go away. So car accidents, deaths. We have a student, a middle school student that died of cancer. And so it's about going in and talking to his class, his peers, about what happens when a friend dies, those kinds of things, to the more tabloid type traumas of the sort of murder-suicide kind of So that's an exciting part of our program, and that's a new part. We have a new faculty member starting with us in September because we had a retirement. And so I don't even know what he's going to come up with as a new program, but my approach to being an administrator is to enhance the faculty's creative interests and their desires to sort of move psychological services into the current century, certainly, but move it forward in whatever it's going to be. With a lot of interest in digital technology and in how that's going to impact psychological services. There's a lot more stuff that's being done online. There's a lot of questions about that. And then there's also the development of an incredible number of apps that are capable of enhancing treatment that people actually do in the room. And how that's going to pan out in terms of psychological services, I don't know, but it's for us to figure out and discover, so I'm kind of excited about that. I could go on and on, but I won't. I'll go back to Dr. Marshall Silverstein, retired. He's been around for a long time. There were 4 original faculty members that started the program in 1990. He's the second one of those original 4 to retire, so there are 2 of us that are left over. It's a full-time program. We require all students to come full-time. It is a daytime program. Is it possible to work while you go to this program? I guess. I don't know how. If you have a very flexible job, we have somebody in the program right now who's a personal trainer. She works her hours around everything, and she can still work. We've had people come through the program who are bartenders, musicians, or whatever. They can work their hours around the program, but it's really hard to have other kinds of full-time jobs when you have to be here much of the week. In your first year, without clinical requirements, you do have a day or 2 where you may be able to work around the classes. We provide some financial assistance. We have particular kinds of programs that students apply. Not the graduate awards that she was talking about in the other room, but within our doctoral program, we have our own financial aid and our own financial assistance that we provide. Our goal is to try to provide every student with something. Tuition is right now at $42,000 a year for graduate full-time tuition. That's a lot of money. And yes, we do have summer courses in the for the first 3 years. Students pay a flat tuition rate for the first 3 years, including summer sessions. In your 4th year, you pay by credit because you have very few credits you take in your 4th year. So you're really talking about the first 3 years of being full-time tuition. This is on our website. You can see the tuition and how it drops, the number of credits and how it drops. So with that, the $42,000, students get an award somewhere between $10,000 and $18,000 a year for tuition right now. What our financial aid budget will be for the years to come, I don't know. It's not really up to me. It's up to the administration and how much they give us. We take in a cohort of 20 students. We try really not to increase that. We are not a PsyD mill. There are many other programs, PsyD programs in particular, that have very large classes of 50, 60, 70 students. They take in that as a cohort. So 20 is our sort of ideal number. We have classes that are a little bit smaller. I don't think right now we have a class that's larger.